It's Davina Stanley from the Clarity First program here. And today I have the very great pleasure of interviewing Richard Medcalf from X Quadrant. Now, Richard has got some terrific things to say about strategy and about influence and about all of the sorts of things that need to happen as we transition from being an expert in an area or perhaps a solo practitioner toward leading a team and then potentially moving further up the chain, just having greater influence and also being more strategic. So I'll head now into the conversation with Richard, and I hope you enjoy this one today. Remember to press, I find.
Exactly.
All right. Well, there we go. So, welcome, Richard. Thank you so much for making your time today. I loved coming across your website and actually was listening to a podcast, the first place I came across you, and hearing how impact matters such a lot to you and how you really love finding, working with leaders at that intersection between purpose and strategy, leadership strategy, how you bring those things together for leaders and as they filter those things through their teams. So thank you for being with me today.
Yeah, and thanks, Davina. Yeah, it's great to be here. Yeah, you're right. Those things are important to me, deeply important. Purpose, because I think that actually we all want to make a difference in the world where it matters. Strategy, because frankly, we haven't got enough time to do everything. So we have to have a plan, right? We have to know what's actually going to make a difference. And leadership, because often the way that we create our impact in the world is going to be with and through other people. And we need to know how to bring the best out of the people around us. And so I think those three things for me are deeply important to who I am. I think my little secret is that I've got a what people may say is an impressive CV, but deep inside, my secret is I'm desperate for more impact, right? And those tend to be my clients as well, people who have already achieved a lot and yet know there's another level that they want to get to.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, having worked in consulting and just, for a long time now, just seeing that passion that comes from people and who really want to get the most out of everything that's going on it's a really fun place to be. And when I was listening to the podcast and was hearing a bit more about your journey, you talked about that pivot you made from being an expert to being somebody who had influence. And it seems to me that probably that experience was to want to not overuse the word pivotal in the way you're thinking and shaping the work you do. Can you tell us a little bit about how you made that shift from being an expert and a consultant to being an influential leader?
Yeah, it's you're right. It's a key one. And I think if I look back at my career, to be honest, that my main, if I was to do something differently, it would probably be around that transition, because I probably waited a bit too long. I was resting a bit on my laurels probably because I was pretty damn good at what I was doing as an individual contributor, right? And therefore I could ride that wave, and it got comfortable, right? And I was able to impress people by doing that. And yet I started to realize, you can do the best project you want or the best piece of work, but it could very easily end up sitting on a shelf or being deprioritized in the next phase, or you
Yes.
don't get that coalition around you of people who actually want to drive this forward. And so I think for me, that was a key moment, realizing that actually more technical expertise, if you like, wasn't going to have the impact that I wanted. And so there was that part. So starting to come onto this sense of, well, what do the people around me need? What are they looking for, and how can I contribute to that? And then I think at a deeper level, I asked myself a question which I often ask my clients, which is, what am I going to be saying to my grandchildren or my great grandchildren when I'm old and grey and they're on my knee, and asking what I did with my life? And the answer I came up with at the time, I was working at Cisco, and I came up with, well, I don't want to tell them that I helped increase the EBITDA margin of AT&T by 0.5%. And there's nothing wrong with that, and I've been doing a lot of work with telecoms operators, so that's why this thing came into my mind, this phrase. I don't know quite where it came from, but there's nothing wrong with helping companies improve their margins or anything like that, and I still do that.
Me
But I
too.
realized but that wasn't the story, right? That wasn't the story that I wanted to tell.
Yeah.
That wasn't going to be the thing that lit me up.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was when I started to say, well, what is it that
Yeah.
actually would light me up? And I think most people, it comes down to some impact on people. And for me, my impact was I want to catalyze people who are already highly competent to make this massive impact, much bigger impact than they've made to date.
Mm.
Um, and of course, the impact we long to make for other people is often the impact we want to make on
Mm.
ourselves as well,
Mm.
right? That's the secret. So I'm on that
Totally.
same journey.
Yeah, fantastic. No, I can really understand that and resonate with that idea of being the expert and then wanting to broaden out and help other people. And so when you talk about having that influence on other people, how I can understand the epiphany, but how do you do that in a practical sense? You've moved out into your own space now, but before you did that, when you're working at Cisco, you were starting to need to have more influence internally and so on. What were the things that you did or that you tried to gain more influence so you could have that greater impact within an organization? What did you do?
Yeah, so I think um, there's a few areas. I think the first thing I would say um, for as a principle, right, is that there is operations and there is strategy.
Mm,
Operations is getting results now, and we're very often trained to do that. We're often trained to knock out the results this week, this month, this quarter, this year. And then there's strategy. And for me, strategy is the art of making future results easier.
nice.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So you've got the machine, today's machine, and then you've got tinkering with the machine to improve it for the next month. And so I think I think often influence comes from actually helping people start to think about where they could be in the future that's going to make it easier for them and better and
Mm-hmm.
more successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's okay to focus on, well, what can we do right now, and what are the incremental
Mm,
adjustments we can make in the
mm,
business,
mm,
and all the operational concerns,
mm,
fine.
mm,
But I think actually having people tap into, well, what would be amazing in a year
mm,
or a quarter, and and helping actually people um kind of really emotionally connect to why that's important. And I
mm,
think
mm,
often we stay at this very intellect, especially in business, we fear to go almost past the intellectual level, and these are the
mm,
facts. But I think
mm,
it's
mm,
important to really find out with the other person what's going on. There's an example I can give. I was
mm.
working with so I was part of a team at Cisco, set up by the CEO, to really go and do cross-functional, cross-company business partnerships on with new strategic partners. And we went to work with one company, and basically the two CEOs had met and got excited and said, we should do something exciting. And we got the phone call to say, we don't know what it is, but go and make it happen. And the CMO, we got on, we had a first meeting with the chief marketing officer, and we were okay. They were a little bit skeptical because they'd had some experiences with the company in the past, and they weren't entirely sure what were these guys here to do. Are they trying to sell us something? What are they, are they trying to play the CEO card to force us to do things we don't need to do? So it was a good meeting, but there was some like, okay, well, come back and we'll explore a bit tentative. And we got onto a conference call a couple of weeks later just to review the progress we'd made. And um, and the CMO turned up a bit late, and he thought he was on mute as he was talking to his chief of staff. And he was like, "What are these guys? Oh, what are these guys doing? Blah blah blah." And he was kind of being very negative in the background about like, "Oh, I've got to have this call with these guys." And so he was starting from a very negative place. But we turned him round because he started. We got on the call and we went through, and I think we found out much later. He started to realize, okay, these guys have been listening to me, and they're not here to push something. They're actually been drawing upon what we need and building
Aha.
around that. And
So
building
not
around
just
that.
listening while the mic was not on mute, but listening
No,
during
no,
the
sorry.
process as
Yeah,
well. No,
listening
that's
to
all
him.
right.
No, yeah,
Because
no,
I
no.
was just
Right.
clarifying in my own mind which one you meant,
Yeah, we were just
hearing him
eavesdropping all the
properly.
time and bugging him. No. So it was really about we would actually been paying attention to to actually what was required. And I remember he took me to his office a couple of months later and said, Richard, you've been doing the Lord's work. I remember the phrase, he said, because you've been doing the hard graft, and this is not like a short-term payoff for you. I didn't realize that, but we appreciate it, and we see that there's real effort here to find a way to create something that's beneficial. So in a way, influence you get when you start to help people get what they want, right? At the end of the day.
Isn't it interesting, because it could be, you could tend to think that influencing and communicating up and communicating out is all about putting stuff out there, but actually you're saying quite the reverse, aren't you? You're saying, listen really well and do good things for other people, and demonstrate that you're there you're committed, if you like, and people will respond to those things.
I'll give you another example from an executive at a global tech company that I've been coaching, executive coaching. She has a really key technology project that she's been asked to figure out and to promote, that's going to really make a difference in the way her company relates to partners and customers. And she said to me, well, I've got this key meeting with two of the key regional CEOs, the key regional leaders, and I've already been getting negative vibes from them. They're not sure this project's a good idea. And the question she came to the coaching session was, well, how do I convince them? And that's exactly the motion you were saying. It's like, I need to explain. And so many times I hear this, and this is just one example, but it's repetitive. It's like, I need to get them to understand. I need to get them to buy in, and it's this very pushing motion. And there's definitely a space for a time to be clear and very precise. But I said, well, get curious, right? Just put your agenda on the back burner for a second. Like, these are sensible people. Perhaps start the conversation by saying, hey, now I'm curious because we have this project we've been talking about, and personally, I can just see all the benefits. I think it's going to be incredible. It's going to do A, B, and C. But I'm aware that you're not convinced, and I'm really interested by that, because there must be something here that I'm missing, or I'm sure you've got an interesting perspective about what's the issue. I'd love to understand what where you're coming from on this and what you're thinking. So actually, rather than trying to kind of arm wrestle them into submission, just get curious and get on the same side of the table. So I often pick up like an object in coaching, like, here's a cup, right? So I would rather than put it between us and make it like this is this thing that we're wrestling with, I kind of put it to the side and say, well, the two of us, let's talk about this thing. Have you noticed this? And it might be a relationship issue. You might say, I've just noticed recently that the two of us, in meetings, we seem to be having big debates in the middle of the board meeting, all right? Or in a team session, I'm just noticing that we're throwing little barbs at each other. What's going on there? Because that's not normally how we are. What's going on? And you get curious about it. And so I think that idea of, I call it push and pull. It's like you need both. Some of us are great at pushing and telling and demanding and pressuring people, frankly. Other of us are great at drawing people out and listening. But the flip side is we then don't make our needs or our requirements clear. So push and pull, I think they're both key leadership skills.
No, I like that. And having some discernment as to know which to use when is part of the key. And I guess that comes with experience and maturity, doesn't it? So no, I love that. And that sense of curiosity, I think, is really engaging, isn't it? Because people love being asked about themselves. They love talking about themselves and their own point of view. So if unsure, let them talk, and it gives you some time to think, if nothing else, and just observe and really calibrate, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think people, when people have a chance to talk about it, and they can be much more open, if they're not feeling that they're having to justify their position. But you're just interested in their position, then it can actually evolve, because they're not in that fight or flight defensive posture.
Yes, yeah, no, I can see that being really helpful. And I think that this does take some preparation, doesn't it? It does take some time to actually think about, when you're going into a meeting or into or a discussion, and just being aware of the vibes and aware of the relationship as well as the material that you want to convey, and being crisp and to the point wherever you
Mm.
need to be. So how do you carve out the time to take that extra leap to be influential, to be strategic, to really think about the best way to handle these conversations? There's so much going on. You've got to
Mm.
deliver so much. How do you actually carve that time out? What are your suggestions?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things, right? There's influence in this strategy, and we should be careful about not to mix those up, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
so I think yeah, one thing that so let's talk about perhaps strategy to start with, because I think once you have that, then you can be influential around
Mm,
it.
mm,
So I think that the first thing is um, that we need to identify the moments of truth where we're going to have a chance to convey our strategy, right? And convey our key points and our
mm,
insights about the
mm,
business and where it's going and what needs to
mm,
happen. Um, so a moment of truth might be, well, I have my management meeting, right? Or I'm going to be invited
mm.
into the board meeting or whatever. And so you already be very, very clear. So about this is the moment where I need to show up as a strategic leader. Right? I think
Yes.
that's really helpful. Um, and then when you have that is to decide that is when I need to be concise and deliver my point, and you're the expert in
Mm,
this, right? With real precision. So
mm.
I liken it to I think it's the third Mission Impossible film, where they kind of basically start in the first 10 seconds. They're counting down. They're about to shoot Tom Cruise, and it's like 3, 2, 1, bam, and then the screen goes black, and then the film begins, and you're totally hooked because it's like, oh my god, they just killed the hero in the first 10 seconds. What the hell's going on? And so they've kind of delivered the punchline, and then you're like, well, what's going on there? What happened?
Creating
And then you can,
curiosity again, using curiosity again.
yeah. So you create curiosity, and the number of leaders I've worked with who have turned around their perception,
Mm,
because previously people were like, oh, these are just like operational, like low level people. They come in, they kind of waffle about their stuff. It's not concise. And just by getting them to go, okay, this is a key moment for you. What is the number one insight? And lead
mm.
with it. Don't do 20 slides of context and then get to your point. Lead with the key point. Um, and then say, I'm now going to give you 3 reasons why this is so important, or these are the 3 reasons why we can conclude this. And suddenly you're in control of the meeting, and you haven't got people flipping ahead in the deck saying, well, yeah, all these are financials. Where's the actual, here's the recommendations right on the last page.
I love that. And I love that I didn't prime you to say that too. I love it.
Well, it's interesting because it came out in the last week, right? This exact kind of thing,
Yeah,
um, and so I think showing up as a strategic leader is often about those moments of truth, but other people get to
absolutely.
reevaluate who are you and where are you.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's a
and
real opportunity, isn't it? And I think, though, one of the things that people in my world ask me, they say, look, I know I need to do this, but I also know that it's going to take me quite some thinking, particularly perhaps when I'm transitioning
yeah,
to a role where I haven't
right,
done a lot of this before.
yeah,
So how do I
right.
carve out time?
So
No, that's all right. Yeah, just
yes,
thinking of the week, it's so busy delivering. How do I separate
yeah,
myself from that? What are some sort of maybe tactics, even
yeah,
not the
tactics,
bigger things,
yes,
tactics for actually carving out that time, other than taking it home and working on the weekend? Putting
well,
that
yeah,
off
right,
limits.
absolutely. So I'm a great believer in boundaries, right? Because boundaries will actually create pressure in the system, healthy pressure. So, like if we're going to go on vacation on Friday, then we get our work really productive, right, the day before, so we can go off. Um, so I tend to recommend people know, like, this is my work week, right, and therefore I'm not just going to add on to it, but I'm going to reprioritize. Um, what I think the simplest hack, it really is to number one, block out some time in your diary, like a time when you go, okay, I'm going to take an hour to do. So first of all, simple as something strategic, right? Second thing is you have to label that in your diary. something that makes it so important that you're not going to delete it. If you just put in thinking time, just put in thinking time or like block, then as soon as somebody's asking for a meeting, I go, oh, I've got some time there, delete, and it's gone.
I like that.
Whereas
And
if you actually
especially,
label,
sorry, I was just going to say, especially in situations where others can actually see your diary. There's
yeah,
plenty of
right,
companies that see that,
yeah,
and then they can, no, 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 I'm going to call him and get around that. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So you might label it, if people can see it, you can just label it whatever you want. I mean, I know somebody who on a Friday afternoon, um, she was actually, I think she was like a consultant, so she was working for herself, so she didn't have to, she could do her time as she wanted, but even so, she blocked out her Friday afternoon for her baby child, and she described it as executive board meeting, because, my key, my key client is my child, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
the
Yes.
most important person for me. So, um, and so for her, it was helpful because it was like, oh yeah, this is my executive board meeting, and she could even say to people, oh yeah, I've got executive board meeting on Fridays, right? So it just helped her remember how important it was.
And have
uh,
the language, like a contextually appropriate language, just to
right,
blurt out and not even think. It's removing that thinking, isn't it? Like not having
yeah,
to sort of fudge it or create something on the fly as well.
yeah, exactly. And but otherwise you might just block out something, if you can be more creative on the name, you might come up with a name which is like, it might just be you know drive strategic change, right? Or um, improve my future, right? Or work on systematically getting out of my overwhelm, or whatever it is that actually gets you go, oh, I need to do this. So it has to be important for you to want to do it. And then I think the next thing is you need to start to figure out as quickly as possible. It might not be on the first second, but like you need to really start to figure out, what am I going to do with that time? Okay, because if it's ambiguous, like, oh, I get to think, there's always something more concrete that you can do.
Yes.
So
So true.
so I think you don't want every week to be like unstructured thinking time, unless you've really got into the habit of using that. If you haven't got the habit of it, you're not going to do it regularly, right? So what you might say is, I'm going to spend some time figuring out what's my number one strategic project. So this is really, so what I'd say is, what would be the one thing which I could deliver, either in my own life or in my team or in the business? What would make the most difference if we could achieve this in the
Mm-hmm.
next month or the next quarter or the next 6 months? What would be the best? So rather than, even if you've got a huge vision, well, what would be the one thing that would make the biggest difference? What's the finish line? I think we have to have a finish line. Otherwise, if it's just an ongoing striving towards the future, we just get demoralized, right? You need to have a milestone. You need to have finish lines in the race,
Mm.
right? Or you need to, if you're running a marathon, you need people to cheer you on after you've done the first mile or the second mile, so you know you're
Definitely.
making progress.
Definitely. Yes. Yes.
And so what I tend to say is, like, once a quarter, have one session where you really get, okay, what's my thing at the moment, right? What's the one thing?
And to really focus on that and to drive towards it.
And
Mm.
get it done, rather than having four things that are going to take you a year to complete. Have one thing that's going to take you a quarter to complete, or just
And then
really compress it and then move on. Then it's already working for you in the business. You've already got a capability built. So often we 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 think that more is better and we just add on. And so many people, they have so many projects going on, so many things, and none of them are really moving forward. And you
yes.
have to just find one and say, do it. Right now, I'm in the middle of launching my podcast. Right, I've got tons of other ideas of things I want to do in my business, but I know I just need to get this thing done, so it's launched and it's under control, and I've done, and then I can do the next thing. But if I try and do that and launch a new program and do a marketing campaign and all these things, um, they're all going to take a long time, and I'm going to be jumping from A to B to C to D all the time.
No, that's right. And you end up context shifting, which was what we were talking about offline before, which is, I think people forget how draining that can be and how actually it takes such a lot of time to move our minds from one context to another to another. And I think, in this world of multimedia, we just forget that we really ought not have loads of things going on at once because it feels a little bit like the normal, doesn't it? And the
Yeah.
younger people I see with Facebook open and they're working at the same time and they've got music on as well and they're flitting between them. And I'm inclined to think that that's not a strategy for success. So I
Well,
agree with you that that sense of focus is really valuable and it's so simple yet so easy to stop doing.
yeah, I mean, a couple of ideas around that. The first one is to download a tool like I use Rescue Time,
Ah,
which really just tracks everything you do on your computer
that's
and also on your
scary.
mobile. Yeah, it's a bit tracky, but it will tell me literally how many hours did I spend on email last week, how many hours did I spend on Zoom, or
Oh, okay. I'm going to
whatever.
write that down. Rescue time.
Rescue Time,
I
yeah,
like
I've got
that.
the premium plan. There is a free version which is also pretty good, but the premium plan gives you extra reports and things. And I don't use it all the time, but it's great to go back. And so if I need to actually go, well, where do I spend my time? I can see without doing any effort, right? It's, you could write it down
Yes.
manually if you wanted to, but it takes effort. So I
Yes.
find that that gives me some data, and so the complementary activity is doing a commitment inventory. So a
Ah,
commitment
okay.
inventory is you say, okay, what do I need to do? Or what am I needing to do every single week? And probably every month, because we tend to have monthly rhythms and weekly
Hmm,
rhythms. So
hmm.
what are my weekly activities and what are my monthly activities? Um, so you might say, well, I need to, I'm what are my commitments? Well, I'm committed to delivering a report to my boss, right? I'm committed to doing an email newsletter. I'm committed to one-on-one calls with my team. I'm blah, 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 right? So you go through and you write down on probably into a few categories, that your main deliveries, your management, your teams, your whatever,
Mm.
and all the things that you kind of want to achieve, your commitments. And then I just put an hour, how many hours is that going to take? Well, like I'm committed to like answering my emails, you know like that's going to take some time. How much time is that? And I can use rescue time. Okay, right now it's taking me this much time. so
That's helpful. Yes.
so I actually get down to, okay, this is how I am spending the 40 or whatever hours it is in the week where I'm being productive. And what that does is you suddenly go, okay, this is a fixed quantity. Okay, this is a
Nice.
fixed
Boundaries
quantity.
again. Mm.
And so how
See
much
that?
time am I spending on operations? How much on strategy? Do I have enough time? Is that the balance I'm happy with? Um, because at the end of the day, I work with a client. He's a powerful exec, and he's got brilliant people skills. He knows how to motivate his team. His best work is done in the corridors and on the phone. And yet, when we looked at his time, he was spending about a third of his week on email because he was trying to he had so many demands on his time. I think it was even 40% because he was having to respond to the board, to his team, and it's like, well, okay, there's a problem here, right? Your genius zone is with people, and you're spending all your
Yes.
time behind your computer knocking out emails. When you realize that, then you can start to be strategic and say, is that my highest value activity?
Yes.
No, I need to put
Yes.
some boundaries around it.
No, I love that, the idea of the genius zone. I've heard someone else talk about, they had a different name for it, but that and then the drudgery zone. And
Yeah.
making sure you separate those two things out and make sure the drudgery zone gets automated or delegated out.
Yes.
Then,
Yeah.
there's a distraction zone as well, which, is one to avoid as well. Things
Yeah.
that are fun to do, but don't
Yeah.
necessarily add a lot of value.
Yeah. I
Um,
think that's Michael Hyatt, right? He uses
I
that
think it
language.
is.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is. Yeah. No,
Yeah. And
fantastic.
well, and a really practical way. So we've talked about, you talked about putting that strategic hour in there, and we've just talked about email. So
Mm,
the words I use, and words are really helpful because it locks it in our mind,
mm.
is prisons and fortresses. Okay.
Okay.
So your prisons are, what things do I need to keep within a certain band? Like I'm doing email from 4 to 5 p.m., but not all throughout the day. That's my prison. Or I'm going to do like an admin burst on a Friday afternoon for like an hour and a half where all my admin for the week is done and I clear up my desk and I'm done. So prison. And then a fortress is the opposite. Fortresses are things which protect a protection zone. So I need to protect this time for strategic thinking. I need to protect this time for working on my number one project. I need to protect this time for, frankly, seeing my family. What are the fortresses which are the immobile things?
Yes.
I had a fortress many years, which was running. It was like, I don't mind moving it. I need to go for a run in the week. I don't mind moving it around according to my agenda, but I don't delete it.
I'm with you. No, I'm with that with my yoga 3 times a week and make sure that it actually happens, and scheduling things around it, just because those sorts of things, and they're both, personal activities, but they do make such a difference to our energy, and make sure we can keep going. So I love that idea of the fortress where you're keeping things out of it, making sure that, you're keeping the barbarians away, if you like. And then that notion of the prison where you're keeping it inside a particular space and not letting it sort of infiltrate the rest of your week. I think that's a great concept to close on. They're very, very powerful images and very, very useful for people. So, no, thank you for those. Look, I've learned such a lot from our conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I think we did talk about having some sort of opportunity for people, if they'd like to make contact with you, to do so. And did we have a link in mind? Was it
Yeah.
xquadrant.com/clarity or something like
Yeah.
that people could use
Yeah.
to go and find some more information about you? You've got some really great materials.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are three things that might be interesting. So the first one, is I have a little resource called How to Lead Strategically When There's Already Too Much to Do.
Oh,
So
nice.
this is fantastic for people who feel, I've got a lot on, I've got my team, I've got all my operational stuff. What are the questions I should be asking myself, right? What are the different shifts to make? It's just a very simple checklist of some key questions and key ideas. So very digestible. And you can get that at xquadrant.com/clarity program. In fact, I'll make it even Clarity First, right? That's your brand.
Lovely.
Clarity
Thank
First.
you.
So
Yes.
Clarity First, just call it Clarity First. I'll change the URL. So xquadrant.com/clarity first. The second thing is, as I've just been saying, probably by the time this goes out or by the time people are watching it, my podcast will be alive. And that's called the Impact Multiplier CEO. It's for CEOs, but also people who want to think like CEOs. And it's at that intersection of strategy, leadership, and purpose. And the first series is around what I call the 5 impact multipliers, which are exactly this. It's like we can't multiply our own time, our time is fixed, but what are the ways in which we can kind of, rather than incrementally add on, what are the ways in which you can multiply our impact through our team, through strategic thinking, through building commitment in others. And so that could be an interesting place. You can find that probably wherever your podcast is, or you can go to xquadrant.com and you'll find it on the website as well. And then finally, I guess, is just something which I've been doing for a number of people at the moment, which is I make a space probably once or twice every couple of weeks for to coach somebody who's going through a new leadership challenge. And he's not a client. I don't do any really hard selling, but I just enjoy broadening my client base, or broadening the people I've worked with or I've coached, and giving back to people who perhaps are going through that new phase in their leadership. Perhaps they've got a new role, or they've stepped up, or they're trying to break into a new level, or they've got a team issue that they're really struggling with or wrestling through. And so I tend to offer, say, 1 or 2 slots every couple of weeks for people, just to get an experience of what it's like to be coached and to help them break through that. So it's not for everybody. There has to be kind of, I could say, a pressing need, something which they can really see is key. And they can find the details for that on the website as well, if you're interested. But you can go to xquadrant.com/speak. So there you are, the PDF, there's a podcast, and then there's an opportunity to speak live if that's helpful.
That is wonderful. That's very, very generous. And I think just as we do wrap, I do have one more question for you. X quadrant, and you're talking about the multiplier and all of that. And I know you've got a lovely consulting graphic with, 4 boxes on it. Just wrap up by telling us, how did you come up with that name? It's cool. How did you find it?
Yeah.
Or how did you come
Well,
up with it?
yeah, I've actually got a little manifesto on the website, which you might be able to find. It shows you a bit more about it. But yeah, I mean, as a consultant, I was a consultant for many years, right? And having that 2x2 matrix with an X in the corner is a classic thing. So
If
the
you
short
can't
answer
find
is,
one, invent one.
yeah. So there's actually a couple of things going on in that. Obviously, the first one is the domain name was available, which is always important. But seriously, I suppose there's a few things. The first thing is the X stands for multiplication, right? Because that's how we create exponentially bigger impact, is when we think in terms of multiplication. How do we multiply ourselves, our impact? The second thing is it's about insight, because often you find yourself with an either or choice. Do I have more time for myself, or do I go for the promotion, or whatever it is? Well, what happens if you could do both? Right? What would that look like? How could you actually be more successful than ever and have more freedom than ever? That's a new dimension. You've folded that choice around into two axes, and it creates a new opportunity. So that's also what the X quadrant stands for, and it also stands for ambition, really, because there's always a place to be getting to, right? It's always what's that next place for me, and so those are deep. All those things are important to me. I think insight, ambition, and multiplying impact.
Wonderful. No, that's terrific. Well, thank you so much, Richard, for coming and talking to us today. And everyone, you can find more about Richard's work at xquadrant.com, and we'll have a link below the recording here for you to go directly. So thanks again, and we look forward to talking with you again soon offline.
Thanks, Davina. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.